Hi, I'm Kim Isenberg, Editor-in-Chief of Superintelligence. Welcome to the Superintelligence Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Kari Briski, NVIDIA's Vice President of AI Models. We're here at GTC 2026 to chat about their new models and what they mean for the next wave of AI development. Let's get into it.
Thank you for having me. Welcome to GTC.
It's actually the second time we talk, but this is the first time we're talking in person. Kari, it's so good to finally meet you.
Yes, in person.
It's day 2 for me here. It's amazing so far, but I think we should talk about Nemotron a little bit more. Last time we had the first chat about Nemotron. You launched Super last week, right? And then GTC happened.
Last week feels like a month ago.
I guess so. And GTC happened with a lot of announcement on top of that. But let's start with Super, right? How does it feel to hit that milestone?
It feels amazing. It's really just a testament to the entire company coming together, because you think about it, it's research, it's applied engineering, it's our partners, it's even our marketing team, and everyone truly understanding the importance of it, what we want to achieve with the open source, and getting it out there. So it's been a long time coming. When we had released Nemotron 3 Nano in December, we were really excited about it because it was not only a new architecture, but a new model. Is Nemotron 3, the first one. But we announced our roadmap at that time, right? We said that Super would be coming. We said that Ultra would be coming, right? So it's kind of scary sometimes to put your roadmap out there to let people know, but we thought that was important. So when we delivered on Super, it was really satisfying and exciting for everyone.
Yeah, it's happening all so fast, right? But I think we're talking about the architecture a little bit later. Let's stick to Super at the moment, right? Yeah. So Super has 120 billion parameters, but only 12 billion are active at any time. What does it mean actually, and why does it matter for someone building a product?
It's all about speed. I mean, if I without getting too technical, if someone asked me that, what is a mixture of experts? What does that mean? It's really about speed. Because when you have a 120 billion parameter model, if you had a dense model, that's more latency to be able to answer questions. So when you do a mixture of experts, and we say it acts like it's only a 12 billion parameter model. And so that's why mixture of experts are really popular architecture right now. Yeah,
it's good that you already mentioned the architecture, because Nemotron Super is a little bit special. The architecture mixes number 2 transformer attention, a mixture of experts. Usually large language models are pure transformer.
That's right.
Why did you choose to go hybrid?
Yeah, it's really about token efficiency and being able to save space at the same time in memory. So when we actually introduced the hybrid Mamba architecture with Nemotron 2 Nano, but that was still not a mixture of experts. But we had written a paper about it actually last probably March in 2025. And this is what we love about open source, right? When we write, you can put out a paper. We publish not just the research, but the recipes and everything. Right. We wrote the paper. We've seen other models in the open source also pick up that same architecture. So when we released Nano 2, it was really just to say, hey, we're making a shift to this architecture. Would you find it useful? Because people have to even update the training recipe and the frameworks in order to adopt it. And then once we released it in Nano 2, then we took that same architecture and we expanded it to the mixture of experts and went larger. And so everything you do have to do is kind of a progression. And that's why we started training with the smaller model to show that we can scale now to the larger models.
And you already mentioned efficiency as one of the most important aspects in this regard, right? So latent mixture of experts compresses tokens before routing them to experts. So you can use 4 times more experts at the same cost, right?
That's right.
Can you walk me through what that compression step actually looks like? I think this is very interesting for the community.
I would say that when I explain it to people, I try and explain that imagine that you have, instead of restaurant and everyone has their own kitchen, you have many chefs sharing a single kitchen. And so you're able to have the experts be able to route to the right cook or chef, right?
Fantastic. And you train Super in NVFP4 for bit precision from the start instead of training higher and quantizing later. What's the risk, and did you deal with it?
Yeah.
It's a tough question, right?
Yeah, no. The whole purpose, again, is that we build these models for ourselves. And this is when we talk about extreme co-design, right? So Blackwell supports NVFP4. We want everyone to realize the benefits of less memory, faster training, not just for, because when you're going through the tokens, it can train faster as well as the speed for inference. But when we do this, we want to show the byproduct of all of this is not just the model, but showing people that, you can train a model to state-of-the-art accuracy with this reduced precision, right? It's silly to say that, we trained the model in MVF before, but it didn't reach accuracy. What would be the point? You can't tell people to go do it if you're not doing it yourselves. So that's why we did it, to show that, hey, you can train in this reduced precision and reach state-of-the-art accuracy. By the way, here's the recipes.
It worked out pretty good, right?
It worked out pretty good, yeah.
Fantastic, amazing. Super predicts multiple tokens at once, built in speculative decoding, right? How does that work in practice, and how much faster does it make things in real agent workflow? Because, again, efficiency and speed
is really important. Instead of doing single sequential token prediction one after another, you're able to do kind of a fan out, or in the old terms, like a beam search of like, here's all the tokens it could be, and then you put them all at once, almost like in this bath. It makes it a lot faster. Something around 5x speed up, but in practice, probably like 3.5. It depends on how you're using it. It was so funny because I ran into a gentleman in the elevator the other morning, and he's like, hey, I'm seeing like 3x, he actually quoted it. He's like, I'm seeing like 3x the amount of tokens being output in this model's twice the size of the other model. And I was like, that's great.
I mean, it should have there's real life experience from people talking about it, right? It has such another impact.
In an elevator at GTC, yeah.
Okay, but developers can also control the reasoning models, right? Full reasoning, a configurable budget, and a fast. When you kept the thinking about it, what actually happened inside the model?
Yeah, well, so basically in the post-training phase of the development of the model, we're able to say, given these types of questions, when your reasoning is high, medium, low, this is the type of verbosity, this is how long you should think, this type of reason. It's all about, when you do pre-training, it's all about the knowledge. And then when you do post-training, it's about how do you behave, how do you use that knowledge, and how do you act. I think in previous generations of Nemotron, we had actually done, you could set your own budget from 0 to whatever, and that was almost too technical for everybody. So we kind of learned, this is like the great reason that we treat this like a library and we do multiple releases, because we learned that just doing like a high, medium, low was much more practical for everybody. And so it's done in the post-training phase. We find that sometimes low is just fine for certain use cases, but high, again, like the more you can reason about something, the more time you have to get to the final answer, which is better. We call it compute as intelligence. Right. That's why it's so important that the faster you think, you get to the better answer, right? Because the faster you think, more tokens, but if you do it faster in the same amount of time, you can come up with a good answer. I'm
just curious because you mentioned you got the feedback that it was too technical. Was it a feedback you heard many times, or was it just like...
Yeah, it's like how do I know how many tokens it's to tell us output? Like the model should just decide. And so it's just kind of tuning that knob of, instead of being very specific, just kind of give it a guidance. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look about training and openness, right? You train Super with reinforcement learning across 21 environment configurations using Nemo Gym, over 1.2 million rollouts. Can you describe what one of those environments looks like? What counts as a rollout? I think this is very interesting for the community.
So when you talk about an environment in simple terms, it's kind of how do you go work out your gym? Are you going to do arms? Are you going to do legs? What's your training experience? And so, again, I'm going to go back to the analogy of like the pre-training is the knowledge and the post-training is the experience. Just like when we have graduated college, you have to take tests, you have to say that you did it, but it's kind of like table stakes to take the test. You have to, until your experience and all the things that you go through, that's how you truly become better and an expert. So the more environments that you expose the model to in post-training, the better the model gets. And so I think even Quen put in their paper that they did 20,000 environments. Like we said, we had 21, but you have 1 million, 1.5 million instances of these rollouts. And so for every question, you tell the model, like, here, go try this out. You give it a question. Right. It needs to be able to work out the problem. And that's called the rollout, because it's using a lot of tokens. It has to figure out what tools do I have available to me. At the end, it's calling tools, and at the end, there's a verify or a teacher or a grader. Say, yes, you did it right. No, you did it wrong. But just as in the real world, even the wrong path is a learning experience. Right. And so you send that entire rollout back into the training and say, this was wrong, this was right, and then it starts to bring the model back to like, if I see a similar situation like this in the future, here's how I should act, or here's the types of tools that I should call. And that, again, because that's the post-training is both inference and training all at once, because the rollout is just the inference path of what tools do I call, how do I do, and then like all of the information coming back together, all the logs, everything.
I really like the metaphor you just brought up with the gym and the kitchen, so amazing. But I'm most curious about the openness, right? About its open source character, so to say. So you're releasing the full training receipt from pre-training through alignment, and most labs keep them a secret, right? So what made NVIDIA decide to share it, and what does the receipt give developers that just having the weights doesn't?
Sure. So both pre-training and post-training, again, we built Nemotron for two reasons. One, we built it for ourselves, and for the extreme co-design of compute, storage, and networking, how does this whole system work together, exploit the latest features and functionalities. But then we know that this is the new way of developing software in the future. And so if you're going to develop software, would you not release an editor and how to compile the code and how to do performance tricks? And so this is the reason we want to give all of the recipes out so anyone could do this, because this is a new development platform. Pre-training, we have a lot of labs who are actually less so than post-training, but there's a lot of labs that have the skill and knowledge and know-how and compute to be able to do something from scratch. ServiceNow is an example. They took our open data and they took some of their data and they kind of tweaked the architecture of our model a little bit, and they created their own April model. For post-training, the environments are actually the secret sauce. Any of the open models that release open weights have not released any of their data or their environments. Right. But if you think about the open model builders that are releasing open models, you can't really blame them because they have APIs or their business depends upon what is their training data, where did they get it from. It's important to their business. For us, our business model does not depend on the model. Do you know what I'm saying? So we don't have a consumer endpoint.
You don't have the pressure to run through the API to review there.
Right. And I think that and for post-training, it's really important because of domain specialization. Right. Again, I'm going to go back to compute as intelligence. Right. And so for post-training, you can synthetically generate these environments. You can synthetically generate data to make variations of these environments for these rollouts, right? So if you take one question, you can make 1,000 variations of the question with synthetic data generation. And when you put that out there, someone in cybersecurity can go make their environment. Someone in life sciences, like Edison Scientific, they can go make their post-training environment. So when you put the recipe out there, it enables everyone else to be able to go create these environments. And so again, if it's the behavior and how you become an expert in your field or domain, everyone's going to have to kind of create their own evaluation tests and verifiable reward across post-training.
Just curious, was there some kind of feedback from the community or companies about the openness, that they're very glad about it?
Yeah, I think it's also a little bit of trust through transparency.
Right.
We opened it up and they're like, oh, okay, good. You opened up, now I feel confident I can use it. But then they can go interrogate our data sources as well. And so it was surprising because once we put the data sets out there, we got a lot, even though you put up on Hugging Face, you actually can't tell who's pulling it or anything. And so, we had people reaching out hey, we saw that you put your data set out there. What else are you doing?
Yeah, right.
And what's your roadmap for more data, right?
So trust is the keyword here, right?
Yeah.
You're also releasing agentic safety data set about 11,000 agent workflow traces built with Lekera AI, right? What failure modes did you find in real agent deployments that synthetic data couldn't catch up?
What failure modes did we find in real deployments that synthetic data couldn't catch?
Yes.
Well, number one, we put out the data sets in the open so that other people can interrogate them. And if you think about it, we are a development platform. Just like for any vertical domain, we tend to not want to be in that domain because we're the development platform. Yeah. But we found that if we put out certain safety evaluations like jailbreaking and things like that people were able to pick that up, or content safety, for example, people would be able to use it to define their own. And so that's kind of that's our take, is that we have our own real-world use cases, but again, as a development platform, we're not monitoring other people's use cases, and so we not only have the guardrails, but we also have a product that we call it ROC. It's from Deep Space Nine, but being able to interrogate and try and audit and try and poke the guardrail to say where are your failure modes, and once it figures out a failure mode, it is able to either generate synthetic data itself or warn the guardrail, hey, your guardrail failed here. So it's less about us in the production mode, but more about our development platform have the tools to say, here's your failure mode, I'm letting you know, warning, and then building that back into your guardrail automatically.
I'd love to talk about this topic much more with you, but since we're a little bit time constrained, I'd like to focus on the GTC we're attending right now. So day one, Jensen announced many different announcements about Nemotron, about releases. So I have to look at my iPad because it was so many announcements, so much. So the keynote in Jensen showed Ultra and some impressive benchmarks, right? The comparisons were really, really impressive. Voice chats, NemoClaw, and especially the Nemotron Coalition. So that's a lot at once, right? So was Super the product story and the GTC the platform story? Or how should we read that sequence?
Yeah, I think you should read the sequence as we were delivering on our roadmap. So we had said that we were going to put out Super. We put out Super. It just so happened to be a week before GTC.
Right.
It actually worked out great because, again, there's so many announcements. And at least Super had a little bit of a moment, and it allowed people to pick it up and try it. Base of Ultra had just finished training a week before Jensen's keynote. We had such great results. We said, let's put a slide in. Like, that's literally how fast things work. We were really proud of the results. And it's across our, not just MMLU, but coding and mathematics. It scored extremely high. It's the world's best open base model right now in that size category. And it also has fantastic throughput because it's half the size of these open, large frontier level models. So we just wanted to share that with the world. We're in post-training now. And again, there are some people that want to pick up an untrained, fine-tuned model, and others, just last night I was talking with someone like, oh, you finished Ultra, and I said, yeah, do you want to try and post-train it yourself? And they're like, no, we'll wait for you to do it. But it's just the starting point. Like I said, these are standardized tests, but now you got to go put it through like grad school and just behavioral school.
Yeah, and I think people are very, very excited about the release. In Super especially, people are all about Nemotron. There are so many talks about it. I think it really hit a point, right? Mm-hmm. People are really, really excited about the upcoming releases, especially since we saw the benchmarks. So I'm excited as well. So I'm really, really looking forward to it.
I think one of the benchmarks that we were really proud about, too, was the Deep Bench 1 and 2 benchmarks because, again, Gentic Systems isn't just about one model. It's about a system of models. Right. And so I think that, one of the things that we like to, people always ask me about other open models, and I say, I love them. There's no one model to rule them all. We believe in a global ecosystem of open models and proprietary models, too. You have to be able to use open models with proprietary models to be able to find your balance of accuracy and total cost of ownership and latency constraints and everything.
Right. Yeah. Let's have a look at the Nemotron Coalition, because I think this is super interesting, and I wasn't even expecting it. So the Nemotron Coalition has 8 labs, right? The first project is a base model co-developed by Mistral and NVIDIA. And since I'm from Europe, this is especially interesting for me. The other contribute data, evaluation, and domain experts for post-training. So why is Mistral the co-developer for the base model specifically?
Yeah, we have a great working relationship with Mistral. We've done like a Nemo Mistral models in the past. So the teams already know how to work really well together. Another partner who has experience base training, pre-training a base model from scratch. And so, being able to work very quickly there. And the other parts of the coalition bring strengths on different types of data types, different types of languages, right? Different perspectives that they can take the base model and help us with the post-training and the aspects of post-training too. So I think it was just really about the timing of the coalition, how it came together, who's ready to go right now. I think Jensen mentioned we're already training parts of the base model of Nemotron 4 already. And so it was really just about timing and speed.
Super exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, so I hope we can have another talk when Ultra is being rolled out, and maybe even when Nemotron 4 rolls out. Yes. So, Kari, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. Have a great day. Yeah.